I've always believed there are moments in life that test what we think we know about people. Sometimes it happens in small ways, like when someone you trusted disappoints you. Other times it hits like a lightning strike, ripping the ground open beneath your feet. And as I started digging into this story, I couldn't shake the feeling that it echoed something from my own past, something I never really talked about. Maybe that's why this case stuck with me the way it did. Maybe that's why I remember every detail. The story begins with Judge Melissa Carter, a woman whose entire life had been built on order, discipline, and a devotion to the truth. People saw her as the kind of judge who never flinched, never hesitated, never allowed emotion to cloud her decisions. But the people who said that, and there were many, didn't know her history. They didn't know what she carried behind the calm expression she put on every morning before stepping into her courtroom. On the morning everything changed, Melissa arrived earlier than usual, as she often did. She liked the silence before the courthouse filled with voices, footsteps, demands, arguments, and the weight of other people's tragedies. The early hours were her sanctuary. She usually took a few minutes to settle into her chair, flip on the lamp with its soft amber shade, and breathe in deeply before opening the day's case files. But on that morning, something felt different before she even reached the bench. She would later tell a colleague that the air felt heavy, as if the day itself was warning her. She brushed the feeling off, forced her mind back into its routine, and reached for the first folder in the pile. She didn't know that everything she had carefully rebuilt over the past 6 years was about to crack open. The folder was thin, usually a sign of a preliminary hearing or a procedural matter. She opened it casually, flipping through the front page of standard legal text. But then her eyes drifted to the defendant's information, and she froze. Her hand actually slipped from the page, and the folder fell flat on the desk with a dull thud. She blinked, thinking she had misread it. She hadn't. The defendant's name was Lucas Hale. For a long moment she couldn't breathe. 6 years earlier, Lucas had been her husband, her world, her anchor. And then, without warning, without explanation, without even the decency of a goodbye, he vanished. Melissa had come home to a nearly empty apartment, his clothes gone, his phone left on the counter, his wedding ring placed neatly on the bedside table. No note, no calls, no answers, nothing. The police classified it as a voluntary disappearance. No crime suspected, no body found. They told her people walk away from their lives all the time. But Melissa knew Lucas, or she thought she did. And if he wanted to leave, she believed he would have at least looked her in the eyes. She spent months searching, years healing, and eventually, she buried the ghost of him and found a way to keep going. Yet now here he was. Not dead, not missing, a defendant. She stared at the name until her vision blurred. Her hands trembled so violently she had to place them in her lap. She closed the file and pushed back from the desk, her breath shallow and uneven. She felt something inside her, something she thought she'd locked away forever. Break free, raw and burning. She stood and walked around the room, pacing like a storm contained within 4 walls. Her mind raced through memories she had avoided for years. His laugh, his touch, the softness in his voice when he promised he'd never leave her, and the cold silence that followed the day he disappeared. A knock on the door jolted her back into the present. Judge Carter? Court will begin in 10 minutes. She didn't trust her voice, so she nodded. As soon as the clerk left, Melissa gripped the edge of her desk to steady herself. She had presided over murder trials, custody battles, high-profile criminal cases, situations that would have crushed lesser judges. But nothing had ever shaken her like this. When she finally walked into the courtroom, her steps were deliberate, as if each one required conscious effort. She reached the bench, adjusted her glasses, and forced her expression into the calm mask the public expected. The bailiff called the room to order. Papers rustled. Chairs creaked. And then, as casually as announcing the weather, the bailiff read the defendant's name. State of California versus Lucas Hale. The sound of it in someone else's voice felt like a physical blow. Every muscle in her body tensed, but she kept her gaze straight ahead. She didn't allow herself to react. She couldn't. Not here. Not now. The defendant was brought in. Melissa's heart hammered. She didn't look up at first. She was afraid that if she saw him, The wall she had spent years rebuilding would shatter in front of an entire courtroom. But eventually, inevitably, she raised her eyes. Lucas stood there in handcuffs, looking thinner, older, more tired than she remembered. His hair, once neatly styled, fell messily over his forehead. His jaw was sharper, his posture more guarded. He looked like a man who had lived 1,000 lives in the years since he left. And then he looked at her. For a split second, everything around her dissolved. It was just them, two ghosts staring at each other across a room full of strangers. His eyes widened in recognition, shock, guilt, fear, something she couldn't yet name. His lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to speak but couldn't. Melissa's breath faltered, so barely that no one else noticed. "Mr. Hale," the prosecutor began, but Lucas didn't look away from her. Not for a second. Melissa forced herself to break the connection. She straightened her posture, gathered whatever dignity she could salvage, and said, "Proceed." Her voice was steady, but inside her chest, her heart was fighting to escape. The charges against Lucas were serious: felony fraud, falsified documents, and a suspected connection to a larger criminal network. The prosecutor detailed an elaborate scheme involving fake investments and stolen identities. Melissa listened but heard almost nothing. Every word sounded distant, muffled, like she was underwater. Instead, her mind filled with questions. Where had Lucas been all these years? Why did he leave her? Why had he disappeared without a word? And how had a man she once loved with her whole soul ended up in chains in her courtroom? The prosecutor finished their opening outline, and it was time for Lucas's defense attorney to speak. But before they could begin, Lucas did something Melissa never expected. He spoke directly to her. "Melissa," his voice cracked slightly. "I mean, Your Honor." His attorney grabbed his arm, whispering urgently for him to stay silent, but Lucas didn't seem to care. His eyes were locked on hers, and she felt every unspoken word like a dagger. "I didn't know. I had no idea it would be you," he said. A ripple of murmurs moved through the courtroom. Melissa's throat tightened. She opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. She was a judge. She was supposed to have authority, control, composure. But this went beyond professionalism. This was a collision of two lives that had been violently torn apart. The defense attorney stepped in quickly, apologizing, urging Lucas to sit, insisting the outburst be stricken from the record. Melissa allowed the procedural corrections to happen, but inside she was unraveling. She needed to steady herself. She needed distance. And she needed answers, but none of them could come from the bench. For the next hour, Melissa forced herself into autopilot. She took notes. She listened to arguments. She asked measured questions. She kept her face perfectly neutral. The courtroom saw a judge performing her duty. Only she knew that behind every controlled gesture was a hurricane she could barely contain. At one point during a recess, she remained seated as the courtroom emptied. She lowered her head into her hands and let out a shaky breath she'd been holding since the morning. She didn't cry. She refused to. Tears would make it real. She whispered to herself, or maybe to the ghost of who she used to be. "Why did you leave me, Lucas?" Her voice was barely audible. Eventually, she lifted her head, wiped under her eyes even though no tears had fallen, and prepared for the next session. When Lucas was brought back in, the air in the room changed. He didn't look at her this time, as if he understood the boundaries she needed to survive the moment. But she could feel him there, like a memory breathing at her back. The hearing progressed. Evidence was presented. Witnesses were scheduled. Yet every detail seemed secondary to the unspoken tension between judge and defendant. Melissa knew she couldn't recuse herself, not without raising suspicion, not without jeopardizing the case. She also knew she couldn't let her emotions interfere. She had a responsibility to the law. But Lucas wasn't just a case. He was the unfinished chapter she had tried desperately to burn. As the day neared its end, Melissa asked if either party had additional matters to address. The prosecutor shook their head. The defense attorney declined. And then Lucas did it again. He lifted his eyes toward her, and very softly, almost inaudibly, said, "I'm sorry." The bailiff barked at him to remain silent. The defense attorney hissed his name like a warning. But the words were spoken, and Melissa heard them. They lingered in the air long after the courtroom fell quiet. She dismissed court for the day with a voice that held steady by sheer force. But as soon as she stepped into her chambers and closed the door behind her, her legs finally gave out. She sat on the floor, pressing a hand to her chest, trying to contain the storm inside her. For 6 years, she had lived with the question that had no ending. Now the answer was standing in her courtroom in handcuffs. And whether she wanted to or not, she would have to face the truth. Melissa didn't sleep that night. She really tried, but her mind wouldn't let her rest. She kept replaying the moment Lucas looked at her, the apology whispered like a confession he had been holding for years. She lay awake in the dim light of her bedroom, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the lamp on her nightstand. Even the shadows felt heavier than usual, settling around her like fog. She had spent so long trying to forget him, convincing herself he no longer mattered. But the truth was crueler. He had always been there, just beneath the surface, like a wound healed only on the outside. His sudden reappearance had ripped everything open again. When the sun finally rose, she felt as though she hadn't slept at all. She sat on the edge of her bed, elbows resting on her knees, and pressed her fingers against her temples. She needed to be composed. She needed to remember who she was now. Not the woman he walked away from, but the woman she forced herself to become in his absence. A judge. A leader. Someone who didn't break. But the human heart doesn't follow job descriptions. Before leaving for the courthouse, she paused in front of the hallway mirror. Her reflection looked exhausted, stripped of the armor she usually wore. She straightened her posture, lifted her chin, and forced strength into her expression. She wasn't doing it for the world outside. She was doing it for herself. The courthouse felt colder that morning, as if the walls themselves knew what was coming. As she walked down the corridor, every step echoed too loudly, like the building was amplifying her hesitation. When she stepped into her chambers, she closed the door gently behind her and allowed herself one deep breath before the day began. When the bailiff signaled that the courtroom was ready, Melissa stood, smoothed the front of her jacket, and walked inside. Lucas was already there. He didn't look at her this time. He stared at the table in front of him, shoulders slightly hunched, as if he knew that even looking at her might break her composure. His restraint didn't calm her. It made her wonder what he was hiding. The prosecutor began the day's proceedings by presenting new evidence. Bank statements, timestamps, witness testimonies. Melissa followed along mechanically, her pen gliding across the paper even as her thoughts drifted toward the 6 years of silence she wanted answers for. She kept catching small details, inconsistencies, not in the evidence but in Lucas's behavior. The way he flinched at certain accusations, the way he straightened at others, the way guilt flickered across his face at unexpected moments. It wasn't the expression of a man trying to hide a crime. It was the expression of a man hiding the truth. At recess, Melissa retreated to her chambers, closing the door with more force than she intended. She leaned against it, breathing hard. She knew she was dangerously close to letting emotion interfere. She had to stay objective. She had to stay balanced. But how could she, when the one person who had broken her was sitting 20 feet away, bound and silent? She sank into her chair and stared at the stack of documents on her desk. Part of her wanted to read every page until she solved the puzzle. Another part wanted to throw everything onto the floor and scream. A knock pulled her back from that edge. It wasn't the bailiff. It wasn't her clerk. It was Lucas's attorney, David Sloan, standing in the doorway with a hesitant expression. "Your Honor, may I speak with you in private?" It wasn't unusual for attorneys to request private discussions, but today, Melissa felt a spike of unease. She nodded slowly, briefly. He stepped in cautiously, closing the door behind him. "I'll be direct. My client is concerned. He believes you may have a conflict of interest. And honestly, I believe the same." Melissa's pulse quickened. "Mr. Sloan, I assure you I can remain impartial." "With respect," Sloan said carefully, "Lucas didn't leave because he wanted to. He left because he had no choice." Melissa's heart stopped. "Excuse me." Sloan exhaled slowly, studying her expression before continuing. "He told me not to say anything, but I can't let this trial continue without addressing it. Lucas disappeared because someone was after him, and by extension you." Her breath caught. "Who?" she whispered. Sloane hesitated. He wouldn't tell me, but he made it clear that someone dangerous was involved. Someone who made threats. Someone he believed would hurt you if he stayed. Melissa shook her head. Why would anyone come after me? Sloane shrugged helplessly. I don't know. But Lucas said it was the only way to protect you. He ran. He cut ties. He lived under different names. And if he's telling the truth, he still believes you're in danger. Melissa felt the room tilt. She had wanted answers, but not like this. Not through a second-hand confession delivered by an attorney who barely understood the weight of the words. Your Honor, Sloane's tone softened. You deserve to hear this from him. But I understand why he hasn't said it. He thinks he ruined your life once already. She felt something crack inside her chest. Something fragile buried deep. When Sloane left her chambers, Melissa remained seated, staring at the wall as if it held the truth she couldn't grasp. She had spent 6 years believing Lucas left because he stopped loving her, because she wasn't enough, because he chose to disappear. But now the story was darker, more complicated, more dangerous, and far from over. When court resumed, Melissa walked in with a steadier posture, though the storm inside her had only intensified. Lucas risked a glance at her, just one brief but full of torment. She held his gaze for a moment before looking away. The prosecutor called a new witness, a financial analyst who detailed the trail of money tied to the alleged fraud. Melissa listened carefully, forcing herself to focus. But she noticed Lucas's growing agitation. Something the witness said made him tense, then pale. When the witness cited a particular transaction, one tied to a shell company in Nevada, Lucas's hands clenched. Melissa took note. As the witness stepped down, she felt a cold ripple across her shoulder blades. Something wasn't adding up. Lucas wasn't reacting like a man guilty of theft. He was reacting like a man trapped, caught in something bigger than the charges suggested. The tension escalated until the defense attorney requested a brief recess to speak with Melissa privately. She hesitated but agreed. In chambers again, Sloane closed the door quickly. He wants to talk to you, Sloane said. Off the record. No cameras, no transcript. Just 5 minutes. Melissa's heart pounded. That's highly irregular. I know. But he says he can't defend himself unless you understand the truth. She inhaled deeply. She shouldn't. She absolutely shouldn't. But she did. When she entered the small consultation room adjacent to her chambers, Lucas stood there without handcuffs, guarded but vulnerable. The door closed behind them with a final click. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Lucas exhaled shakily. You look different. She didn't respond. She wouldn't let him rewrite the narrative. Why did you leave me? She asked, her voice tight. You owe me that. He closed his eyes. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I did it to save your life. Don't lie to me, she snapped. I'm not lying. His voice broke. Melissa, the people involved in the case I was investigating before I disappeared. They weren't just criminals. They were dangerous. I uncovered something I wasn't supposed to find. And when I realized they had started watching you, I panicked. Her pulse drummed in her ears. You told me you loved me, Melissa said softly, her voice trembling. You promised we'd face everything together. He stepped closer, not enough to invade her space, but enough to make her feel the old echo of them lingering between the walls. I left because staying meant they would kill you. She shook her head. If that were true, why didn't you go to the police? I tried. But the people involved were above them. Inside them. Her breath caught. I've been running ever since, Lucas continued. New cities, new jobs, new names. I thought if I kept moving, I'd keep them away from you. But eventually they caught me. And I guess turning me in was easier than killing me. Melissa stared at him, trying to process the swirl of fear, anger, betrayal, and something else she didn't want to name. Why didn't you call? She whispered. He swallowed hard. Because if I heard your voice, I wouldn't have been able to leave. Her chest ached. And now, he said, and for the first time tears filled his eyes. Now I'm tired of running. Before she could respond, the bailiff knocked, signaling that recess was over. Melissa stepped back, regaining her composure. Lucas lowered his gaze, accepting the inevitable separation. They returned to the courtroom, but everything felt different now. She wasn't just presiding over a case. She was navigating a labyrinth of lies, danger, and unresolved love. She couldn't show it, but internally she was fighting to keep herself upright. Throughout the afternoon, Melissa watched every detail with new eyes. The prosecutor's arguments, the documents, the financial trails, the timelines. She noticed subtle patterns, certain accounts linked to companies she recognized from Lucas's past work. The pieces of the puzzle began forming a picture she didn't like. Lucas wasn't the architect of a crime. He was the scapegoat. As the day neared its end, Melissa issued the final procedural instructions. Court adjourned. The tension in the room dissipated, but not between her and Lucas. He was escorted away, but his gaze lingered on her until the last possible moment. When she finally returned to her chambers, she sank into her chair, staring at the faint reflection of herself in the dark computer screen. She looked like a woman unraveling. She thought of all the nights she cried over Lucas's disappearance, thought of all the harsh things she told herself to survive it, thought of how she rebuilt her life on the belief that he didn't want her. Now she knew the truth was far darker. She wasn't abandoned. She was protected. And the cost of that protection had been her heart. She rested her head in her hands and let out a trembling breath. She didn't know how she would handle the coming days. She didn't know how she could remain objective while holding the truth inside her chest like a bruise. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't letting the system destroy Lucas without uncovering the full truth. Not again. Not this time. And as she sat alone in her chambers, the weight of her past and future colliding around her, she felt a shift inside herself, a decision forming in the silence. She would uncover who was behind all of it, and she would not let Lucas face them alone. Not anymore. Every time I share a story like this, it reminds me how unpredictable life can be. We think we understand people, their motives, their choices, but there's always more hidden beneath the surface. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you. Truly. I hope this story kept you engaged, maybe even made you reflect on someone from your own past. And if you enjoy narratives filled with mystery, emotion, and the kind of twists life throws at us when we least expect, I'd love to have you here more often. Make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with me for the next story. I promise, there's always another secret waiting to be uncovered.